Hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Janet Tran, and I'm the Education Manager here at the Walter and Lenore Annenberg Presidential Learning Center, and I am proud to welcome you to the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Library. In honor of our men and women in uniform, both past and present, who defend our freedoms, I'd like to invite Kim Carter and Ben Lang from the Citizen Scholar Institute at Royal High School to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much, and please be seated. Thank you. Before we get started today, I wanted to recognize a few special guests in our audience. So first, thank you to Mr. Bill Hull and Principal Kathleen Roth, and the students, teachers, and parents from Vista Fundamental School here in Simi Valley, California. Principal Deborah Salgado and her team at the Citizen Scholar Institute at Royal High School and all of their students. Dr. Michelle Herzog, the Vice President of the National Council for Social Studies and a member of our National Advisory Council. And of course, Joanne Drake, Chief Administrative Officer and the heart and soul of the Reagan Foundation. Now, something tells me that our remarkable guest today needs no introduction. Still, before I invite him to the stage, I'd be remiss in this place of great history if I didn't recount at least a few memorable moments from the life of Dr. Buzz Aldrin. Even before he left that indelible footprint on the lunar surface, Dr. Buzz Aldrin already led an accomplished life. He studied mechanical engineering at West Point, served in the United States Air Force during the Korean conflict, was a decorated colonel and awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for his heroics, and then went on to earn his doctorate of science in astronautics at MIT. The PhD, along with his docking and rendezvous innovations for the Gemini and Apollo programs, earned him the nickname of Dr. Rendezvous. And as part of Gemini 12, he performed the first successful spacewalk. And on July 20th, 1969, as part of the Apollo 11 crew, he answered President John F. Kennedy's call to do things not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, and Mike Collins went to the moon. 600 million people were enraptured as Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong stepped onto the magnificent desolation of the moon, and then revealed a plaque that read, "Here, men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon. We came in peace for all mankind." Now, history without context and connections can be meaningless. As Buzz Aldrin himself said, the journey was far more than 3 men on a mission to the moon. It was 1969, the year when Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King were assassinated, a decade troubled with domestic turbulence and haunted by the Cold War conflict of Vietnam. "We came in peace for all mankind" was exactly what Americans needed to hear. And peace was, after all, the American objective of the Cold War. Today, we stand in a presidential library, the house that President Ronald Reagan built, and whose presidency is defined by peace through strength that ultimately won the Cold War. Allow me, if you will, to make a few comparisons between two great men. To start, both President Reagan and Buzz Aldrin shared a passion for football in their youth. And while I do love football, I think we can all agree they found higher callings. Both President Reagan and Buzz Aldrin also shared a great love of NASA and the United States space program, despite bearing deep scars from it. Before leaving the dusty lunar surface, Buzz Aldrin left a small pouch on the moon containing mementos, including a patch from Apollo 1. For those of you in the audience who don't know or don't remember, Apollo 1 was the inaugural shuttle of the Apollo program, and it did not make it past the test launch phase. An explosion ended the lives of 3 astronauts, including Ed White, one of Dr. Aldrin's friends and mentors. But despite such grief, Buzz Aldrin rejected fear and boldly traversed the surface of the moon. President Reagan carried the grief of a nation in 1986, after the explosion of the Space Shuttle Challenger. All eyes of the nation were on Challenger, back in the day when school teachers could take a teachable moment, and many school children sat in anticipation to watch the shuttle lift off. It did not. But he comforted a nation, recalling that exploration and discovery can be painful. The future, President Reagan reminded us, does not belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave. The tragedy of Challenger crew could have been in vain. Yet less than 2 years later, under President Reagan's watch, the United States successfully launched the Discovery Orbiter from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. These men remind us that tragedies don't define Americans. Resilience does. So clearly, both President Reagan and Buzz Aldrin shared an incredible optimism and the belief that America's best days are ahead. With our work here at the Walter and Lenore Annenberg Presidential Learning Center, we strive to create engaged and conscientious citizens. In the civic learning world, we rack our brains thinking of ways to get students engaged. As I read Mission to Mars, I wondered, was there ever a time when children were more engaged and more proud to be Americans than during that golden age of Apollo? Buzz Aldrin will present us with his vision for space exploration and settlement. But maybe, if we look more closely at his plan, he has answers to a few of our national questions as well. So, without further delay, I invite to the stage a decorated pilot, a celebrated author, a space pioneer, recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom, recipient of the Congressional Gold Medal, NASA's own Dr. Rendezvous, a man with an asteroid named after him, a crater named after him, multiple stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and as some of you may recall from 30 Rock, he's amongst a handful of men who can say to the moon, "I walked on your face." Please join me in welcoming the one and only Dr. Buzz Aldrin. Thank you so much for being here. So before we speak about your book today, I wanted to address for a few people in the audience who were able to see, during the Pledge of Allegiance, you did a vet salute. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes. I was reminded after 2008 that there was a law introduced by a senator allowing, not mandating, but allowing veterans indoors, outdoors, at the Pledge of Allegiance or the Star-Spangled Banner to render a hand salute instead of putting their hand over their heart. To me, it's very important that veterans understand this, and even more important, the non-veterans understand why those people, those few people around you that you see saluting during the national anthem, that they are the people that served this country years ago and are very proud about their service, as we should be proud about their service. This is a wonderful gesture, and I'm reminded that I was at the Paris Air Show in its opening a few years ago, and at the opening they played the Star-Spangled Banner, and I saluted, and somebody asked me, why are you doing that? And I said, well, there was a law passed a while back, and a voice behind me said, yes, I introduced that law into the Senate. I am very proud of my service to the country, and the words on that plaque that said, we came in peace for all mankind, I think are wonderful words to remind us, that reminds me anyway, that everything I believe we do in our space efforts with the technologies that we've learned, and even with the competitiveness that exists, that the United States' purpose is to bring peace to all the world, and that's why we venture outward, not doing things that are easy, but things that are hard, to set an example for our young people, our technicians, and the rest of the world.
Well, thank you so much
Just to remind
for your service.
ourselves how fortunate we are to have lived and live in this wonderful country of ours.
We are very fortunate. Thank you. And I'm sure I speak for everyone when I say thank you for your service to our country as well. Now, the American space program has a remarkable past, from landing on the moon to the space station to the Hubble telescope and now the Mars Curiosity. In Mission to Mars, you speak about the future of the program. Why is Mars the key to the future of space exploration, in your opinion?
Mars has been the ultimate objective, as uttered by quite a few leaders in the past. Somehow we, through missteps, through maybe political influence, we've never reached the point of making it a specific objective. I'm 83. I don't know
Still
how many
young.
years I've got left, but I certainly hope to be around when Mars is made a specific objective, and I believe that that should be during the 50th anniversaries of 6 out of 7 successful landings on the moon from July 2019 to December 2022, right in the middle of a re-election year for the president who succeeds into the White House. On my birthday, January 20th, 2017. That's why I'm thinking of moving to Washington.
Well, I think we'd welcome you
I've paid
there.
enough taxes here in California.
Now you can see a lot of people in the audience are holding your book, so they haven't been able to read about why you have such a focus on the settlement and not just the exploration of Mars. Do you think you could expand further on that?
Yes, I even wrote a science fiction story in 1996, and in it I believed that the people from Alpha Centauri who came to Earth to visit should return and go back, even though their world was going to be destroyed. That's the reason they came here. Obviously, I've changed my mind. I believe that Earth, human beings now have the capability to establish a refuge, a safe location elsewhere in the solar system, in the event something happens here, like what wiped out the dinosaurs, a pestilence, a nuclear conflict, who knows what. My most admirable, or one of my admirable astrophysicists, Stephen Hawking, gave us 200 years to establish a presence, a growing settlement. And I said to him, Dr. Hawking, I think we can beat that 200 years. I believe that Mars is clearly the most Earth-like object that may have harbored life in some form. It appears to me that there's a lot of wind in that thin atmosphere on Mars, and some people have said there were oceans on Mars, oceans of water. There aren't today, but if the 200-mile-an-hour winds blow long enough, there happens to be a volcano 90,000 feet high, higher than anything here on Earth, and it's got a lot of dust on it. And I think the winds would blow that dust and cover the frozen oceans, because they would be frozen. Now, I'm not an astrophysicist, but this is just one of my concepts, and I believe that some of the evidence that we see of stream beds and others, and the poles that have ice on them, the fact that Mars's day is not 24 hours, it's about 24 and a half hours. And their tilt is not exactly the tilt of Earth that gives us the seasons, but it's not far from it. And they go a little further from the sun and then come back a little closer. They're not a perfect circle. So they have seasons there. It's pretty cold on Mars.
I think we're...
But it's pretty cold on places of the Earth, too, and we managed to do pretty well. It clearly is a better place to set up housekeeping than the moon. 13 days of daylight with the sun shining, it's very hot. 13 days of darkness, it gets very cold. No atmosphere, nothing grows. Just crystals of water in very dark craters. Don't go back to the moon.
Now, if there's anything to take from this
you.
conversation, it is don't go back to the moon, and we'll remember that. Now, I want to speak a little bit about space tourism. You've been a long advocate of outside agencies, outside the government, supporting space travel. However, ultimately, you want a president to commit to the settlement of Mars. Why is that so important?
Let's see, I think you have two questions there. One is a president saying something about going somewhere.
Somewhere, Mars, maybe?
And the other one was about tourism.
So why is it...
Well, now, the president is going to say, thou shalt establish tourism in space. It's the private sector that's going to do that, and the people that get enticed with what's up there. And yes, I've been an advocate of tourism in space for 20, 30 years. We started thinking about that when the shuttle had a big cargo bay, and maybe you could put people in there. As a matter of fact, just before the shuttle began flying, I was approached and worked with some United Airlines pilots. And they wanted the airline to buy a shuttle so that they could fly something better than a 727 so that they could begin to fly the shuttle commercially. And while one of these discussions was taking place, we were talking about how are you going to pick people, and some voice in the back of the room said, why don't you have a lottery? Man, I thought, what a fantastic idea. And for about 20 years now, I've been trying to cultivate the right situation to install a lottery. I don't do that anymore because somebody has come up with a much better idea. Now, you young kids out there, let's say 18 to 20, or maybe everybody's younger than that. Have you ever heard of that grooming fragrance called Axe that really attracts the ladies? Well, now, Axe is a part of a big company, Unilever, and Axe has purchased 22 suborbital flights. And they've advertised that you just apply to axeapollo.com and show a picture and a few other things, and then there'll be 100 or so picked, and by next December they will go to the Axe Apollo Space Academy in Florida, and there they'll get further training and evaluation, and it'll be narrowed down to 22 people. And I've talked to the company that's supplying these rides, and it's not Richard Branson and his flowery, well-marketed Virgin Galactic, but he's a smart guy, the one who owns this X-Corp company. And he's got great plans for the future. So I want to be sort of an ambassador to this effort for several years in the future, because I think it is a wonderful opportunity. Now, that's for ordinary folks. Now, not so ordinary, if you got $200,000, why, Richard Branson will sign you up at the bottom of the list. Now, if you've got $1 billion,
well, who doesn't?
There's a person who has a company called Golden Spike. Now, he'll take your money, I don't know how much, and land you on the moon. I didn't think there was much chance of that ever happening, but then he reminded me that what he's really talking about, and this is a good idea, that there are nations in the world that don't have a space program, but they have young people. They would like to develop a lot of enthusiasm for technology. Why wouldn't that nation pool together, come up with the money, and then select one person to be that nation's role model to land on the moon?
Wonderful.
I think it's a good idea. Now, pretty soon he's going to run out of countries, but I've got a place for him to send his people as part of my design for what the International Lunar Base will look like. Now, we have to know what it's going to look like, not so that our NASA astronauts are going to go there, but the international countries are going to land objects. They have to be put together. Now, guess who's going to do that? The good old USA. We're going to learn the telerobotics on the big island of Hawaii to put big objects together, to make a base on the moon. Now, why is that so important if we're not sending our NASA astronauts there? Well, I'll tell you why it's important, because we're going to go to the moons of Mars and occupy those moons, and then us and other people are going to land objects on the surface of Mars, and we're going to put them together so that we've got a well-established base on the surface of Mars before we start delivering people on an invention of mine back in 1985, which has been improved on considerably by the University of Purdue, cycling spaceships. Now, that's a lot for you guys to swallow, but most of it is kind of in this book. And I'll be trying to convince people in
Well-
White Houses that they should accept the plan of the future, and that'll come up with two things: American greatness in space transportation, American expansion of humanity outward in the solar system. Those are our objectives in their mind.
And you can read all about the Aldrin cycler in this book. Now, you've addressed a group of students in our audience, and we do have many here today. So I was hoping you could speak a little bit about your upbringing and some of the choices you made as a youngster that led you down your professional path as an innovator and a pioneer.
I have indeed been blessed to have been born in the United States at the particular time I was. How lucky can a person be? My mother was born in 1903, the year the Wright brothers flew. My father was an aviation pioneer. He knew the Wright brothers a little bit. He knew Charles Lindbergh. He knew Howard Hughes. His education: he had a physics professor in college, Robert Goddard. You don't know who Robert Goddard is? He's the pioneer American who developed liquid fuel rockets. And my father helped Charles Lindbergh get some money from the Guggenheim Foundation to help finance that. My father started an engineering school after his MIT doctor's degree, and that engineering school eventually became the Air Force Institute of Technology. And guess who paid for my doctor's degree at MIT? Air Force Institute of Technology. Now, because of sort of that background and being lucky or being shrewd and expert fighter pilot, it's pretty good for your record to have shot down a couple of airplanes in the Korean War. That helps. It helps convince Navy test pilots, night carrier landing people, that they're not the only ones who have a little airplane talent, that the Air Force does too. My education just came along. I was just back in my hometown at my high school, Montclair High School, New Jersey. And that education in that beautiful town prepared me for West Point, service in the military, the opportunity to go to West Point. I chose not to go through test pilot training because, you know, there are a lot of people that are really natural pilots. Well, I was good, but I was looking beyond just testing airplanes. So all of this gave me the opportunity to be intelligent and write my thesis at MIT, not about intercepting airplanes, but about joining spacecraft together in space, rendezvous. And because of that, NASA said, maybe we could use this guy. And they changed the rules, so I became an astronaut. And then I was in the right place when we didn't really understand how to do spacewalking. But I'd been a scuba diver, and so using that scuba diver training, when someone said, why don't we train underwater, neutral buoyancy in the spacesuit? I said, yes, 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 great idea. So I was the first astronaut to train underwater for spacewalking. And the last mission in the two-man Gemini series was a tremendous success in spacewalking and prepared us for Apollo, that put me in the right position. Next thing I knew, Neil Armstrong and I were on a mission that got changed to become the first mission to orbit the moon, Apollo 8. Now, we weren't on the mission. The 3 other guys were, but we learned to work together, and the rotation of the crews was such that after one mission, they had a crew for the next 2, so the backup crew from this mission became the prime crew on not Apollo 9, not Apollo 10, but Apollo 11. Wow. Talk about somebody being in the right place at the right time. And now what am I doing? I'm planning to send humanity to begin to occupy another planet in this solar system, led by Americans. What a wonderful opportunity I've had in my life. And I just feel so grateful, and I want all of you to know that a key to that is education and perseverance. Look at a lot of opportunities, pick the ones that you like, and then be good at it, or at least try and be good at it.
Thank you so much. Well, I think it's time to take questions from the audience. There will be staff members holding microphones on both levels at this point if you have any questions for Dr. Buzz Aldrin. And please state your name. Right over here.
My name is Michael Blaugren, and thank you. And I would like to know what your thoughts were when you exited the spacecraft and started down the ladder and actually walked on the moon. What were you thinking inside of your brain at that time?
And there were a lot of thoughts that were in and out of my mind.
It's in the book as well.
No, not everything. We were announced as a crew in January after Apollo 8 flew in December, January 1969. And I went back and told my wife that I was on Apollo 11 and it could be the first landing. And I said, you know, I'd just as soon be on a later flight where we would do more interesting things, because I don't like to give speeches and do all of this stuff. Unfortunately, there was no choice. I was part of a team, and it was up to me to carry on that team. So maybe that's one of the thoughts that went through my mind. Before I went down the ladder, I had looked out the window and watched Neil go down the ladder. Now, why did Neil go down first? The military and leadership in the United States generally says that the commander, the leader, does things first. Okay? There were a lot of other reasons why I should have been first, but the important one I may have mentioned, or the other one was that Neil was closer to the hatch than I was. I won't tell you which it was, really. But it was the correct decision. So now I go down the ladder, and I'm there, and I've already seen that he can walk around pretty easily down there. So I don't need to do what the checklist said, was hold on and check stability and see how it's going to be. I knew that it was going to be real easy to walk around. About that time, I had one of those biological urges. Now, we had just prepared for a while outside, and we had made sure that the receptacle for those urges was empty. So I had great confidence, and now Neil had his first step on the moon. but I had my first.
You know what?
So other than that, we were really concerned with what comes next in the checklist.
We have a question back there.
Dr. Armstrong, thank you for taking my question. The propelling yourself off of the lunar surface required quite a bit of force. Would it be possible for the men who are going to Mars to be able to leave the surface without a couple of years of preparation as far as fuel and that type of thing because of the mass of Mars as opposed to the mass of, let's say, the moon? Did I make my question clear?
Let me see. Are you referring to jumping, or are you referring to the rocket liftoff?
Actually, the liftoff, to remove
Yeah.
the, let's say, the astronauts that go to Mars, is it a one-way trip, or are they going to be able to come home?
Yes and no. About 10 years ago, well, even long before that, I wrote a science fiction story where people came from a star and then they went back home again. But I don't think that way anymore. If we go to a star, we should go there and be prepared to inhabit wherever we go. We should know as much as we can about it. The purpose of sending humans to another object is not just to look at it. We got robots that can very thoroughly look at it, and we can be close in orbit and look down at it. But the purpose to get people there on the surface is to set up a settlement and not bring people back. What are we gonna do with them when they come back? We need people to gradually build up a sustainability, a critical labor force, whatever that may mean. Now, if we were to go and come back and then go again and come back, you know what? I'll bet you that Congress would find another way to spend the money, and everything we would have invested in going to Mars would be doing something else. We don't want that to happen. So when humans go to Mars, they should commit themselves to permanence. Now, the fact that there is a company that is now advertising Mars One, one way to Mars, I don't give them much chance for being able to follow through on what they're doing, because I don't know where they're going to get the money, get the spacecraft, the rockets, and the expertise to be able to do what they say they're going to do in about 10 years is when they're saying. But they've got 78,000 people who've put in some money saying they want to do that and not come back. So they've helped me convince people that when you go to Mars, it's for permanence. At least they're thinking about it. Whether it's going to happen or not.
As you said, the Pilgrims didn't come here and make a U-turn on their boat
Well,
to stay.
I'm sorry.
The Pilgrims didn't come here and make a U-turn on their boats. They came here to settle. So I think Mars will be...
Oh, you heard me talk about the Pilgrims on the Mayflower? The history books don't tell me that they waited around Plymouth Rock for the return trip. They came here to stay.
We have a question on the
We just have to have
Raptors.
a way of thinking that when humans go to Mars, it is such a big deal. Just think, hundreds, thousands of years from now, the history books will talk about the human race doing all these wonderful things on Earth, and all of a sudden, we started a place somewhere else. I know that's going to be a big deal in history for the people that go there, but my big concern is convincing the world leader, the president, that the legacy of having committed the United States to leading the world in establishing a settlement elsewhere is about the biggest legacy you could ever want as a president of the United States.
And we have a
Now
question up
remember
here.
that, because I'm going to need your support about 2017, 18, and 19.
Go ahead.
How much hours did you spend on the moon?
How many hours did we spend on the moon? That's easy. I won't make that a long answer.
Okay.
Now, the spacecraft was there with us in it. We landed and we lifted off about 20, 21 hours later. Okay, but we were outside on the surface about 2.5 hours.
And I think we have a question over here. Thank you.
Hi, Buzz. First of all, I wanted to say you are a stud. I think there are a lot of collectors and enthusiasts that wonder if there's any chance that the Omega Speedmaster may get or come back from being lost in the mail at any point.
The Omega Speed.
The watch that went up
watch.
with you on the moon, any chance that that's been found or come up? Any other news on that?
Well, I got two watches. One of them's a nice, expensive gold one, and I like people to see that one. But this is more accurate. This is quartz and battery. The Omega Speedmaster watch that passed the qualifications by NASA to be used for space flights. Most of us assumed that when we were issued that watch, it was kind of ours to keep, and when we left NASA, we would keep it. You know, the Army did that with little cheap watches during World War. They were called hack watches, I think, something like that. Well, when I was leaving NASA to go to Edwards Air Force Base, the quarters are pretty cramped there, and the display wasn't too good. So I decided to send a lot of memorabilia on loan to the Smithsonian. So the people from NASA came and inventoried everything, took it over to NASA, and got it ready for packing. When the Smithsonian received the shipment, no watch. Last it was seen was waiting to be packed. So that's the story of the watch that I wore first on the moon. Neil, for various reasons, elected not to wear his watch on the surface. He must have suspected that of all the things you can have on the moon, one of the more useless things is to know what time it is in Houston, Texas. But certainly, as far as Omega was concerned, it was a pretty historic item. And the answer to your question is, we don't know where it is. It is stolen property, so if somebody decides to sell it, why, regardless of how they acquired it, they've been dealing with stolen property.
And we have a question back here.
Thank you for taking my question. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Dr. Aldrin. My question is, now that space travel is going to be more commercially available, still $200,000 or $100,000 is still quite a bit of money. Do you expect the value of that possibility dropping significantly?
I really don't know. You talk to the people who are doing that, and of course they're going to tell you the more we fly, the price is going to come on down. Inflation's going to go on up, and there just may not be that many opportunities available. So the price may stay up pretty high. I do think the lottery is a pretty good idea, so there are methods like that that are very attractive. This old lady in Florida just walked off with $500 million. That's not bad if you're pretty lucky. I think that suborbital flight is a fancy that is a filler adventure, an opportunity until the opportunity comes along to be able to get into orbit. That's where the real payoff is. It's not just going up and getting Richard Branson's astronaut wings. I tried to tell them that's not a good idea. But I think suborbital flight is available, is a good thing to do, and a lot of people want to do it and experience that. But I think the opportunity of getting into orbit is so much greater. It's going to be a lot more expensive. But then climbing Mount Everest isn't for everybody either. And diving down to the deepest part of the ocean isn't for everybody either. I keep reminding Jim Cameron that at one time he did ask me if I would go with him. But I think he found out that it was much cheaper for just one guy to go down there. So.
We have a question from a young lady over here, I believe.
Hi, Dr. Aldrin. I'm Sarah Hull from Vista Fundamental School. I want to know, what did it feel like when you took your first step on the moon?
What did you say?
Your first steps, so a little description about the feelings around there.
Well, the first steps were remarkable because the footprint was so well defined, so perfect. And just when we started, there were 3 pictures up there of the boot print on the surface. That pin is also a boot print. Why do I wear it? Well, I took the picture. It was easy to keep your balance. If you lean over a little bit here on Earth, pretty soon you're going to exceed your footprint and you're going to have to jump in a hurry or you're going to fall. But not on the moon. If you get like this, you just push off with your foot and put it out like this. It's a lot easier walking around without so much gravity.
And can we hear from someone back there?
Hi, I'm Maya Tauber, and I just wanted to know your opinion on, since now we have some more really good technology, like for Curiosity on Mars, do you think that robots might take over astronauts' jobs? Like, we'll have really good technology, so we might not need humans to go to the moon. Just wondering.
Absolutely, robots are getting smarter and smarter. I'm not sure that, from what I see a lot of people doing these days, that humans are getting that much smarter and smarter. Let me give you a quick story. 12 years ago, we landed 2 robots on Mars, opposite sides. They were supposed to last 90 days. One of them got stuck after 5 years, and the other one's still going. The program manager, the project manager of that program, a very qualified person, recently stated that what those 2 did in those 5 years 5 years, kind of moving around, 1 day's instruction at a time, very conservative. Could have been done in 1 week if we had a human being with intelligence in orbit around Mars, communicating directly, telling those robots what to do. Now that is powerful. Trying to control something as far away as Mars, and look at the wonderful things curiosity is giving us. Look at much more we would get if we had somebody there. We don't, I think, need to go back to the moon and tell a robot what to do. We can tell it what to do from a distance away without all the expense. We went to the moon for prestige. That's an easy way of saying it. Prestige by beating the Russians. Prestige by gaining technology that we thought we needed to develop for varieties of reasons. But we really, a human being telling things what to do and looking at a rock and deciding what kind of rock it is. You can put a TV camera on that rock and send it back, and a scientist can tell you what kind of a rock it was. There certainly are judgment factors that you need to have a human being there to do. But we have to be very judicious because it is just very, very expensive to send humans somewhere safely in a lander, supply them with all the things they need. The lander is sophisticated. And if we've already done it, we have to really be sure that we want to sacrifice being first to the Chinese, who will be first in the 21st century, by getting there before we do. All they have to do is send somebody around the moon once, or land them for 1 hour and come back, and they beat us. The barrier is much higher for us. We have to go back there and do a whole lot more. So why would we want to do that when there are such greater opportunities? I hate to dwell on that subject, but it's extremely important, because there are people in Congress and other places that want this country to go back to the moon with our NASA astronauts. For their purposes, for political reasons, for whatever they are. As far as I'm concerned, it's not in the best interest of this country for the future. I'm sorry if I sound like a broken record, but I really feel so strong about that.
And if we have time for one more question, can we hear from students over there?
Can't wait.
Hi. I was wondering why we should specifically invest in Mars and face the trouble of terrafacing when we could instead invest in developing space habitats that will benefit further space travel and sustain human life as well.
That's an outstanding question. We need to do what you said first, right now. We need to establish that habitat, a test bed at the space station, and test all that life support equipment. Just recently, a friend of mine who's #1 tourist recently came out with a proposal that a lot of us think is a very good proposal. He wants to take advantage of the Earth-Mars positions because in January of 2018, he wants to send a married couple on a spacecraft to fly by Mars and come back 500 days later. That would be such an inspiring and pioneering mission. I hope we can get ready for it in time, because it would do so much for the country to be able to do that. I'm trying to get him an alternate mission in case that won't work, or you always have a backup crew for a primary mission, So we train the backup crew. I'm trying to get a nice mission for the backup crew to use less than a year later. We need to prepare the spacecraft, the interplanetary habitats, the interplanetary spacecraft, major living quarters, not the small taxi. We need a small taxi and we need a larger part as a team for redundancy to be part of. And we're going to take that habitat and maybe put one on the moon for the internationals, because it's a control center. Then we'll have one off the moon. We'll put one on the moons of Mars. And we'll probably put one or two on the surface of Mars, because it's a place to live and operate out of. That is the most important thing we need right now to prove how to do that habitat, because that opens up the ability to send humans wherever we want to, and to bring them back when it's appropriate. When we send people to the moon of Mars, we don't want to send them there to stay the rest of their life. We're going to bring them back. But they've got things to do. They got to build a base on the surface.
A great
Then we'll
question.
send them back to Mars.
A great question and a great answer. Now, you can tell from the audience and some of the questions you've heard that we have perhaps one of the first people to walk or settle on Mars in the audience right now. What advice would you give them? We've got a little astronaut up there as well.
Well, if you've already gone to college, you're probably too old. If you haven't gone to college, you better learn the things that might help you out. Working with other people, working as a team, having skills that will be useful, practical, and a healthy physical conditioning. You need a dedicated spirit. You need to think of something you want to do and then make sure you do everything that you can possibly do. That's how you dedicate the kind of perseverance we'll really need to be a good team worker, to be somebody who likes long-term activities. I'm disqualified by that because I don't like that sort of thing. It's a great opportunity, probably the greatest you could ever think of, to be a part of serving mankind and your country by being one of those distinct few. Now, if you don't make it, that's okay. Not everybody gets exactly what they want. I sure don't. I keep wanting it, though. So perseverance is really maybe the most important thing. You got to get along with people, though. You got to make friends. Got to have a good sense of humor.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aldrin, for your words of wisdom. I wish we had time to answer all of your questions out there.
Somebody's trying to tell me just how cool I am, I think. You know, I've got 2 cell phones. And I've got a Twitter. Guess what my call sign is? @The Real Buzz. Not that Toy Story guy. He's a fake.
So before we leave today, a few logistical items. Please remain seated until Buzz Aldrin and his guests depart. And the book signing will take place in the museum stores upstairs. Dr. Buzz Aldrin, it's been a privilege having you here today. And we're all inspired by your vision. And everyone, if you could just please join me one more time in thanking Buzz Aldrin.
Thank you. Where are we going? I follow you?
Right this way.